Okay, let's move on to Ukraine now, Patrick.
So a little update on what's going on with the Ukraine conflict here. We have a few developments this week. I know you mentioned some of them earlier in the week on your program. We're going to hopefully expand on some of that here. So one of the big stories, obviously, that's been brewing forever is the much anticipated spring counteroffensive. So we're past spring now, and it's finally arrived, Mike. The counteroffensive, we're told, has begun. Only it's summer, but anyway, a couple of months late. So let's take a look at this. This is even CNN, the fake news network, is being forced to admit Ukrainian forces are suffering stiff resistance and losses in assaults on the Russian lines. So, and we're talking about potentially significant losses in what's called probing operations along various insertion points along these front lines. The main area we're going to look at is around the Zaporozhye area here. And so just looking at the mainstream coverage, Mike, and there seems to be a type of a theme. I mean, look at this image. Ukraine strikes back, crossing the fingers, hoping for the best. So, this is the big counteroffensive that everything is supposedly hinging on here. Read this quote here from the subtext on this article. The next few weeks will determine the future not only of Ukraine, but the entire security system of Europe. The time has come to make a decision, Mike. So not very confident, apparently, by the imagery on the security system of Europe, and certainly not confident about Ukraine's prospects militarily here. So that's the Economist, voice of the deep state. So let's take a look at the spring counteroffensive now in the summer. So we'll look at this. Now, these are estimates, Mike, that we put together.
Well, before we do that, we've got to look at the tank situation because, of course, the story about the Leopard tanks has been running through for a while.
And, sure.
So Bild now has decided to publish some of the footage of this Leopard tank being blown up by the Russians. So this is being admitted in, well, what is it being admitted? It's being admitted in the German press, in Bild at least. But where else? Not really anywhere else. It's certainly not in any of the British media and so on. So Forbes is really the only other Western media that's covered this. And this was yesterday. I think the Russians just destroyed their first Ukrainian Leopard 2 tank, is what Forbes was reporting. But just a couple of days ago, we had this type of thing in the Mail and everywhere else. Russia boasts it's destroyed Leopard tank, but is mocked by analysts who say they've actually blown up tractors. So the story, the Western story was, don't worry, nothing to see here. Leopard tanks all still functioning as they should be because, in fact, Russia was blowing up farm machinery and claiming it was tanks instead. Well, one or two only Western outlets are now admitting that, in fact, that's not the case, that Leopard tanks have been blown up, as you would expect, by shelling. But the vast majority, certainly the BBC and no other British press is covering this story at all. They're in complete denial, it seems.
Sure. Military analysts have looked at that footage that you just showed, Mike, and noted the columns of tanks just kind of being used as target practice by Russian artillery.
Right.
And a lot of people are questioning the fact that these are obviously the trained, especially trained Ukrainian forces that have been spending the last 2 months or 3 months being trained in Europe on these very combat techniques regarding these very tanks. And some of this new equipment is supposed to be cutting edge training, right? To NATO standard, and they're getting wiped out straight away. And so where are the replacement drivers for these German tanks if they're losing?
Where are the replacement tanks?
Can they go from the Challenger into the Leopard and then back to the Abrams? And so again, the chopping and changing of all this equipment is not really a recipe for success, apparently. But back to the spring counteroffensive here, and you can see Zelensky commiserating with his sugar daddy, Joe Biden, there from their recent visit. So let's take a look at this. This is now, what we've done, Mike, is amalgamated Russian MOD with Rybar. And I've looked at other Russian Telegram channels, and the numbers are more or less in this ballpark. You cannot get accurate figures here. You have to go by the credibility of past claims and looking at a multitude of sources here. Looking at past claims, these numbers tend to be pretty consistently accurate compared to other Western sources that tend to really underplay losses.
And certainly nothing from the Ukrainian side is in any way accurate.
Oh yeah, they've lost nobody. They've lost no tanks. It's all going swimmingly well. That's Kiev's party line. This is the first 72 hours. Again, not just in Zaporozhye, but mainly this is where the bulk of the fighting is happening. So this is what we're looking at. Ukraine, 30,000 men positioned over 6 insertion points along these battle lines, okay? So far, the losses reported, according to those sources we've cited, an amalgamation are roughly 8,700 dead soldiers, okay? And this is, again, including other areas, including the fringe of Bakhmut as well, and other areas. 2,900, quote, missing. You could count those potentially as casualties. 4,000 hospitalized. Okay, so already, Mike, you're at 50% losses there, just in the first 72 hours. Okay, 33 tanks, 66 combat vehicles, a combination of different combat vehicles there. 30 howitzers lost. These are lost by Ukraine, and 4 fixed-wing aircraft that we've seen so far. Okay, so that's the first 3 days of the counteroffensive. If these are even halfway accurate, Mike, it's not going well. It's not going well. And considering everything is hinging on this counteroffensive, the future of funding, et cetera, from the West. So we'll move on and see where the analysis takes us next, Mike. But you mentioned this in the previous program here, Anders Rasmussen, former head of NATO, basically saying that NATO is going to send troops into the Ukraine. He warns there. Now, this statement was immediately rebuked by the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba. He said there will be no NATO troops in there. So with the denials and the statements combined, I think there's a possibility that this could happen. So we're not discounting that at all. But so much is hinging on this. This is what Mark Esper is saying, former defense secretary of the U.S. This is his comment on this, on the big counteroffensive and what it means. Go ahead and roll this.
Significant moment. Everybody is looking to Ukraine to be very successful. You know, I was in Europe 2 weeks ago for about 2 weeks, and the number one question over there is, where is U.S. support? And everybody fairly thinks that if Ukraine does well, U.S. support will continue. If not, it could wither. And if U.S. support withers, then a lot of other countries will go with it. So it's very important, I think Ukraine understands this politically, not just militarily, that they have a very successful counteroffensive that shows people a return on their investment in the Ukrainian military.
I mean, this is so craven and crass, isn't it? A return on their investment. So look, we just showed you the casualties. We just showed you the dead soldiers. I mean, you're looking at potentially by the end of next week, 15,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers, and Mark Esper, that's a return on the investment. They've already got $37 billion earmarked for the next round of aid. The United States alone, $37 billion, various packages, arms, and financial assistance. So is the aid conditional on their performance on the battlefield? I mean, how far can the West go on this proxy war? Where's the upper limit for casualties, for dead Ukrainians? Soldiers, is there an upper limit where it becomes this is an immoral conflict and we can't proceed any further and let's sue for peace? Is there such a limit?
Not as far as Western politicians are concerned. Not as far as the puppets in Ukraine are concerned.
Well,
Zelensky.
They're doing very well financially, and yes. I'm saying that has to be factored in as well. This is totally unprecedented in the history of modern international relations. We've never seen such a craven, mechanical proxy war like this, with completely arm's length and emotionally and morally arm's length as well by the West. I mean, incredible. A lot of people have a lot to answer for, I think, in Congress and also in the British Parliament as well. Yes. Forget about the EU. That's another story. So on the...
so in the meantime, of course, the dam being blown up by whomever is still in the news, and Britain really suggesting that this would be a war crime. I mean, let's forget the dams that were blown up during the Second World War by who? by Britain.
Okay.
Right. So that's not
And the dam in Syria attacked by the United States.
right. Indeed.
With airstrikes.
But this would become a war crime because Russia, of course, is getting the blame for it. Now, as no doubt you're going to mention in a second, it has been on the receiving end of weaponry from the Ukrainian side over the last several months. But anyway, just before we move on, I wanted to highlight what Maria Zakharova is saying. I'm talking about what happened yesterday at the Kakhovka hydraulic
power plant.
No, you bit sorry, I've forgotten the hydroelectric is what I'm thinking of. This really should be a subject of worldwide study, research, and investigations. They're calling for exactly the type of inquiry into this event as with the Nord Stream pipeline, and of course they're getting total rebuke from the rest of the Western world anyway. But she went on to say the reaction of the West in all such situations is 100% predictable. It's an endless desire to blame Russia for everything. She's not wrong. The endless linking of all negative things that happen in Western countries in order to maintain the hysterical attitude of their own populations towards the situation around Russia. She's absolutely right there. But calling for a global investigation into this, which quick as a flash isn't going to happen. And in fact, Western governments already saying no way to that. But what's Kiev saying about it?
Well, this is the latest here. Kiev claim they have intercepted calls showing that Russia blew up the Kakhovka Dam. So this is shades of MH17.
Yes.
The SBU has intercepted calls. So we can't wait for the release on this. And we hope that the audio is non-doctored as the MH17 evidence that turned out to be not even admissible in the Dutch kangaroo court trial in The Hague. But hey, it's all in a day's work for the SBU. So that's what they're saying here. This is the latest. Obviously, they held back on this a couple of days before they released it because it was such bombshell intelligence. But so Russia did it. Here's the chorus, Mike, starting with our favorite, Jan Stoltenberg. The destruction of the dam puts thousands of lives at risk. This is an outrageous act. The brutality of the war crimes, etc. So he's saying Russia did it. Ursula von der Leyen immediately weighs in after Jan Stoltenberg. Russia will have to pay for the war crimes committed in Ukraine. The destruction of this dam is an outrageous attack. So I think they both said outrageous, didn't they? No, I'm not sure. Yes, an outrageous attack. Civilian infrastructure, lives at risk, etc. Europe is mobilizing support with our civil protection mechanism. So I wonder what that is. What is the European civil protection mechanism? What could that be? White helmets or something, or rather? Okay, and this is the latest woke sensation. The leader of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, she's saying the terrorist state, Russia, is now turned water into a weapon, destroying the Kakhovka Dam. It's a war crime, she says. This is ecocide, she says. She's coming from the green angle there. And mass destruction, etc. We must stop this cycle of aggression by helping Ukraine to victory and delivering full accountability. All sounds pretty good here. And of course, Zelensky weighs in, Russian terrorists. The destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant only confirms the whole world what we already know, Russians are evil, etc., etc. And so there he goes. It's more platitudes from Zelensky, straight out of the CIA script writing department there. I'm sure they're managing his Twitter account very well. So Michael Tracy stumps all of them here. Another round of Russia keeps blowing up its own critical infrastructure for reasons that no one can explain, according to allegations. Russia's novel strategy for prosecuting the war is to bomb itself constantly. So I'm with Michael Tracy on that one here. But let's take a look at some key data points. Well, it turns out that this is the UN Security Council here, dated October 21st, 2022. The Russian delegation raised this very issue that Ukraine was targeting this dam and using it as a military target here. And they warned about all the potential problems that could arise from such attacks. So this is on the record. Okay, another data point here, December 2022, Washington Post. Complaints here, even the Washington Post admits it. Ukrainians using U.S. HIMARS rockets to strike the floodgates at the dam, at the Kakhovka Dam, same dam, Ukrainian forces. So this has been a military target for months, as you said before.
Well, the key point here is that the evidence seems to be showing that it took quite some time from the point of, because nobody actually knows which attack may have done the damage that finally caused it to collapse, but it's been in the process of collapse for an extended period of time. So for all we know, it could have been that event which caused the eventual collapse. So
there's also the underwater demolition possibility, a la Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
That's also certainly, there's teams on NATO's side that are perfectly capable of putting mines or mining underwater on that dam. So, and also there's a potential of sabotage from the inside as well. So there's a lot of different possibilities there. So let's take a look at this. So who benefits from this? Well, it's worth pointing out, these are just a few data points. This poses a risk potentially to the Zaporozhye power plant's backup power system. That's for the cooling, very important in terms of reactor meltdowns. Threatens freshwater supply to Crimea. That can't benefit Russia, can it? I don't think so. And Russia forced to move back from defensive positions along the flood line. That can't be a benefit to the Russian forces, and Russian mine positions have been lost, which they fortified in those areas. So, these are just a couple. There's many more we could add to this list, but this idea that Russia did it because somehow they benefit, again, from blowing up critical infrastructure, which seems to be a kind of a talking point. Nobody really questions this in the West, but obviously the evidence doesn't point there. Now, Tucker Carlson also weighed in on this issue, and we should note that he launched his first episode of Tucker Carlson on Twitter, hit 100 million views, Mike, breaking the records for any such TV format episode ever. So this was huge. Whether he'll get those numbers in the future, we'll see. He put out episode 2, I think, this morning.
Okay.
He's had his second one out. But he made a claim about this dam. Let's listen to what Tucker said about this issue and the Nord Stream pipeline, and we may even fact check it. But go ahead and roll this.
So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up, just as you would assume they blew up Nord Stream, the Russian natural gas pipeline, last fall. And in fact, the Ukrainians did do that, as we now know.
Do we know that?
Do we know that? I don't know. I don't think we do know that. It seems to me the evidence points to NATO blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines. And again, I'm not even convinced that Ukraine blew up this dam. I think it's possible that we have, we have SAS, we have special boat services, we have Navy SEALs on the NATO side, all capable of sabotage operations and doing it totally in a clandestine way. So we'll fact check Tucker Carlson here on Twitter, and we said that no, we don't know. Rather, the evidence suggests that the U.S. NATO blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. I cite Seymour Hersh, and also a report which we released at 21st Century Wire that really shows clearly that this type of operation can only be done by really advanced teams. And there's only a few countries in the world that have the critical equipment to carry out such a mission. And certainly it's not going to be a 50-foot sailboat called the Andromeda and some pro-Ukrainian rogue people on a pleasure cruise. It's just not plausible. So I don't know what Tucker Carlson's referring to there, but we're just putting that out there as a little bit of a nudge for Tucker.
Okay.